The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to the December edition of the VSA webinar series. I'm Lisa D'Amico, your moderator and webinar organizer. Today's webinar is entitled Can You Feel It? A Tactile Approach to Music Literacy, and is part of a monthly series that comes out of the Office of VSA and Accessibility at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. This series addresses topics related to arts, disability, and education. If you would like to view live stream captioning of this webinar, you can follow the link you see on this slide and in the chat box of the control panel located on the right side of the screen. Before we get started, let's take a moment to ensure that you're familiar with the GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen. This control panel can be hidden by clicking on the orange arrow in the top left corner. If you need to leave the webinar early, you can exit out of the program by clicking on the X in the upper right corner. A recording of the webinar will be available afterwards so you can catch up on any parts you miss. Make sure that you have selected telephone or mic and speakers to correspond with how you're connected to the webinar. You have the ability to submit or answer questions using the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel. If you would prefer to say the question instead of typing it, you can click on the raise your hand icon on the control panel and I will unmute your microphone. Your questions will come directly to me, and during the designated question and answer time at the end of the presentation, I'll relay them to the presenter. I want to emphasize that within the week, I will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's presentation, a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, a handout which Jennifer has prepared, and a copy of the transcript. This means you don't need to worry about frantically taking notes during the presentation. You can go back and watch the recording and review the supplemental materials at your leisure. I'd like to invite you to join us next month as Mala Desai presents Dance Across Cultural Paradigms with Bhangra, a folk dance from India, on Tuesday, January 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. If you haven't already, you can register for it now by clicking on the registration link in the chat pane. If you're active in social media, I invite you to connect with us using the hashtag #VSAWebinar. You can find us on Facebook at VSA International, on Twitter at VSAINTL, and you can also join us on Twitter during the webinar, where my social media intern Courtney will be live tweeting today's webinar. Please say hi to her over there. On Instagram at VSA International. And something new that we're doing this season, if you've attended our other two webinars, we have follow-along worksheets. So I sent out at 2:30 Washington, D.C. time, I sent out an email with copies of those worksheets that you can print and follow along. These are optional, but many people find it useful. If you didn't find that email, you can look in the handout section of the control panel. We have both a PDF and a Word document version. They're both the same, but print those out because Jennifer is going to have you creating your own tactile music during the webinar. And with that, I will turn it over to today's presenter, Jennifer Nichols. Jennifer, are you there?
I am.
All right, I'm going to let you share your screen with us.
Okay.
Perfect, I can see it.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. This is a presentation, as Lisa said, called Can You Feel It? It's about a tactile approach to music literacy. So today we are going to be needing a couple of things. I'll give you a second here to gather them. You'll need either a pen or a pencil. That worksheet that Lisa mentioned, it's called Create Your Own Tactile Music, and if you have that printed, that would be best. It was in an email, or also she said in the handout section. And then you don't need it right now, but there's a handout that explains all the materials I used to create this tactile music, so there's that as well that you can use. All right, so let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about the limitations of using traditional notation in the music classroom. We will go over some solutions that I've found that engage the student so they can have tactile music. I'll show you some of the types of tactile music I have created and have found success with. I will also show you how to make those materials and what you need to make them. I'm going to also share with you today some other music instruction ideas that I used with my students with special needs. And at the end today, we are actually going to be creating 3 different examples of tactile notation. And those will be with just that pen and pencil or worksheet. Okay. So we're going to start off here with the limitations of traditional notation. Typically, it's only 2-dimensional, and it uses a lot of symbols. And maybe some of these symbols are somewhat familiar to our students. There are a lot of unfamiliar symbols there. And it also requires, when you're reading music, advanced decoding and reading skills. And in school, we're always working on our decoding and reading skills, and it's great to keep working on them. But sometimes traditional notation requires a very deep and advanced understanding, and it can be overwhelming for the students. So traditional notation is great. However, there are some limits, and I found that is what was getting in the way of my student learning. So to overcome some of these limits that I found with traditional notation, I decided to create tactile music notation. So here are some tactile solutions. I decided I wanted to create music notation that was 3-dimensional so that my students could really feel pitch and feel rhythm. Instead of always having in traditional notation a lot of those unfamiliar symbols, I wanted to use familiar things with my students. So I was trying to use familiar shapes and objects that they see in everyday life to help them read and learn to read music. And eventually I would transfer my students from using those familiar shapes and go into more traditional notation. But this is just to really help them get started. And then I found out that some materials, some things feel better for some students. So using different materials for our tactile music really helped my students learn how to read music. So we're going to go on now to tactile notation. And here's an image of an example of something I've used. And it's just on a regular piece of paper, but we have these little Velcro stickers that are sticking out and have, the students can feel them. And I use the fuzzy side, but you can use the scratchy side, whatever works best. But we're going to go over the benefits of tactile notation, and I'll show you a bunch of different examples that I used in different classrooms with different students. Also, I'll then go into how to make these, and that's where that handout comes in handy, because the handout I created lists the materials needed for each example. So if you want to try one example, it has a little shopping list there for you. So I'll go over all the materials I use. I will also show you the instructions. And then at the end, I'm also going to share with you, maybe you already have a bunch of listening maps or already printed examples of traditional notation. I'm going to show you how you can adapt those to become more tactile for the students. All right, so our first topic here, the benefits of tactile music. I found that my students were more actively engaged in reading music. And I found that since they had something in their hands to feel and to tap while we were reading rhythms or singing songs, they were more engaged. I also felt they could feel these concepts in music such as pitch, rhythm, and notation. When I would just sing high and low sounds, I didn't know if they were understanding the concept of high and low or the concept of pitch. But when I had something for them to feel, I felt like they were more engaged in learning more of the concept. And the same goes for rhythm and notation. And that's basically how I broke up my tactile music. I have examples that demonstrate just pitch. I have examples that demonstrate just rhythm, and then some with notation. For my pitch examples, I used these examples to teach high and low sounds. Sometimes I was just doing just 2 notes, just one note to represent high and one note to represent low. So maybe I was singing hello to them and I was only using so and me, and maybe I just did hello. Well, my pitch example was demonstrating the so and the me as the high and the low. I have some examples today I'll share with you that work on just rhythm. And I was using rhythms including quarter notes and quarterets and paired eighth notes. But you could even just be doing rhythms that show sound, maybe a quarter note, and silence, just a quarterets, just having those polar opposites. And then we're going to look at some examples that I was trying to have my students work on their notation, and we'll see some examples today where they actually got to feel what a quarter note would feel like if we drew it. So we're going to look at some specific notation examples. So let's go ahead and get started. The first bunch here are all about pitch. This first example I call the simplified staff. Sometimes the 5 lines of the staff can be overwhelming, so I just took one line, and this line just helped the students differentiate between high and low. So I put high on the top and low on the bottom with that nice black line in the middle. And I use this throughout my lessons. I have my students point or tap or even trace and write the word high and low when I'm singing high or low, or if they hear high and low from an instrument. So even if I sing, I do a greeting with them every day when I see them, and I'll sing hello, and I'll sing hello using their name. Hello, Isaac. And when I'm singing, I'm hoping that my student Isaac is pointing high when I'm up in the higher part of my voice and low when I'm in the lower part of my voice. And so he can tap along, or maybe I'm just playing one pitch and they have to decide if it's higher or lower than another pitch. So I use this throughout. The simplified staff is drawn in black and has been glued over with a little bit of hot glue, and I did that so the students could feel like a barrier. They could feel that once they go over this bump, then that means high, and once they go below it, it means low. I also used 2 contrasting colors to show that high was in the blue up here and low was in the bottom, to give them that contrast. So to make this, what I used was foam board. I tend to use a lot of foam board because I find that it's very durable. And I cut it in a small rectangle that the students could fit in their hands. And now I only made one, and I sort of use it when I'm working with my students with special needs. But you could definitely make multiple and have lots of students having these in their hands. But so you use foam board with some permanent markers and a glue gun. The glue gun is a staple in a lot of these materials today. So the glue gun was very helpful. All right, so what I did to do this was I cut the foam board into a rectangle, like I said, and with that black permanent marker, I drew one line down horizontally in the middle. And with one color, I wrote the word high above the line, and one with a different color, I wrote the word low. And then here's I think where this is a very helpful tool, is with the glue gun, I glued over that black line. And in this image that we have right now, I'm hoping you can see that the glue line. You can make it even thicker if that helps. But I use that so that the students can feel the difference between high and low. So this was our simplified staff. When I was working on our simplified staff, I decided that I would like my students to be able to one day transfer to a full staff. So here we have a 5-line staff. I call this our writable staff. And with this staff, it helped my students learn properties of the staff in reading music, such as that it has 5 lines and that there are lines and spaces. Once again, I drew the line in black marker and then glued over with a hot glue gun so that my students can feel when they're touching the bumpy lines of the glue, that's a line. And then when they're in between the 2 glue lines, that was a space. I just really tried to help them figure out lines and spaces. For some of my students who maybe are learning recorder, I wanted to have a way for them to practice their note reading skills. So this writable staff, I made it possible for them to use dry erase markers on it so that they can write in where their G line is or their second space A, things like that. So to make this writable staff, I just basically drew lines on a Word document, just 5 lines for our staff, and printed it out. And I printed it on cardstock, so it was a little thicker there. And I laminated it. That's how it became the writable staff. And we used some dry erase markers and, once again, that glue gun. So here in this picture, I think you can really tell that it has some hot glue on there. And we print out our staff on the cardstock, we laminate it, and then with that glue gun, we just glue over the black lines. And I only did one line of glue, but you could definitely make it thicker. I've also seen things in like craft stores where they already have those pre-done the glue lines, and I think sort of in the scrapbooking aisle. So you don't have to use a glue gun, but that's what I did. So far we have seen 2 examples to help us with pitch. This next one example, it helps us with pitch, and it's very specific, but I found that the students really liked this example. This is our magnetic staff, and it helps the students not just learn high and low, but it's helping them learn specific notes of the staff. Once again, it's helping us differentiate between our lines and our spaces. Although in this example, I did not glue like I did in the previous 2. I did something a little different. And in this, the staff is drawn on with a permanent marker, and this is actually a baking sheet. And I know some people, when they've seen these, ask me, well, that seems expensive. To tell you the truth, I got these baking sheets at the Dollar Tree, so it actually wasn't that bad, and they've held up quite a few years. And what we do here is the students can move these magnetic notes up and down on the baking sheet staff, and that's really where they seem to really enjoy it and have a lot of fun. So to make this magnetic staff, I printed out some notes, a quarter note, I think sometimes that quarter note and that quarter rest are great to start with, and just as they see sound and silence. And then I laminate them for extra strength. Then I used magnetic tape, and there are lots of brands who sell this. I just happen to have the Scotch kind. And then the baking sheet, and I mentioned I just got those actually for $1 at the Dollar Tree, and I made a class set, and it's been really great to have those. Scissors to cut out your note. And I did find with this project, the thicker permanent marker, this is like the Sharpie thick tip or whatever, was very helpful because these lines, you want to make sure they stay on pretty strong. So I did use a thicker marker for this. So to make this, you're going to print out your notes and really whatever you think you're going to use most. One time I didn't have my notes so that they were missing in a bag, and I just used just circle magnets, and those seem to work really well as well. So, if you want to have notes or if you just want to use a magnet that you find that has a nice big circle, I found that helped too, as long as it fits within your line and space and that's appropriate for the spacing. So you'll cut out and laminate your notes, or if you just want to use magnets. And then here's where you will take that magnetic tape and cut little bits of it. And I usually adhere it to the back of the note head, not the stem. I found it was better on the note head. And then using that permanent marker, I just drew that staff on the treble clef. Now, when I made these, I just did the treble clef. A couple of years after, I turned them all over, and on the opposite side, I did draw the bass clef for my students who were at that level. We don't always use it that often, but it's there, and they know that something else does exist, like the bass clef. The best thing about this is that the students can put the baking sheets in their lap. They can put them on a table. They can put them on the floor. And I can call notes, and they can move to them. I can even just call lines and spaces, and they get to actually move that note up and down. So we've gone over 3 examples so far that really talk about pitch. This next example sort of mixes in pitch and rhythm. What I call this next one is our student-friendly notation. And what I've done here is I've taken traditional notation, but I've replaced our note heads with what I call more familiar objects. So what I found is this helps students learn to read music with familiar images and objects. We didn't have all that unfamiliar note heads that maybe they weren't as comfortable with. The size of the picture, or the image I used, would correspond to the note duration. So in this example of Starlight, what I did was anytime it was actually a quarter note, the image was what we have up here in the left, upper left corner. But when we had paired eighth notes, they were 2 smaller stars to demonstrate that these were shorter sounds. So in this traditional song, starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, wish I may, wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight. I'm only using 2 pitches. And I know there are different variations of this piece where you have multiple pitches, but I was just using 2. And I position the stars to correspond with so and me, and also with the rhythm of the quarter and paired eighth notes. Now I also have the words below, we don't always have we're not always maybe using the words, maybe the students are not even looking at the words, but they're there. And what I really do with my student-friendly notation is the students don't just look at this paper and read it. They take their finger, and this is the size I usually try to make the quarter note image, and they put their finger on top of the star so that they're actually tapping through on the stars, not down here at the words. And you can, of course, create these the student-friendly notation without the words if you want. But I did this so that the students could just tap and put their finger while they sing starlight, star bright, and they're actually tapping while they go through. So once again, this demonstrates the pitch. The high and low stars are rhythm, larger stars for quarter notes, and two smaller notes for paired eighth notes. If I did have something like a half note, what I did with my image then is I would take my image and I would draw an arrow going to the next beat to demonstrate that it was held for 2, and they would have to trace that arrow with their fingers. So there are ways to make this for half notes and whole notes as well as 16th notes. Here are some more examples. An example on the left, I continued with Starlight, Star Bright, still with that student-friendly notation, but now it's on a staff, and it's resembling more of what we know as our traditional notation, but we still are using student-friendly images. You'll also notice here that the star size is actually all the same. So I actually took that one variable out and I made everything the same. And I did that, one, to help it fit on the staff better, but two, to help the students realize, now they know how long a quarter note lasts and how long, hopefully how long eighth notes last. But now we're looking more at like the pitch and putting it all together in one picture. On the right side, we have another familiar song. This one has more than 2 pitches. This is a traditional song, Apple Tree. Apple tree, will your apple fall on me? I won't cry and I won't shout if your apple knocks me out. So we have quite a few pitches here. And the apples once again correspond to both the pitch and the rhythm. So the higher the apple on the page, the higher in our voice. And then the lower the apple, the lower our voice. Once again, the bigger apples represent our quarter notes, and then our smaller apples represent our paired eighth notes. You'll notice I did put these lines to sort of help distinguish the different parts of our song, because if you have a lot of apples on one page, it might look a little confusing, so that sort of helps the students in where they need to sing next. And it's the same concept as I've done with Starlight. To make these, I used just Microsoft Word, or you can use Microsoft Publisher, and I just used pictures to represent note heads. And I positioned, these pictures on the page to represent high and low rhythms, so I would alter their size and location. Now, some of these I just made two-dimensional, and they just had that student-friendly notation, that image. However, for some of them, I'm hoping you can see in this picture of our apples here, I put glue dots on them. And the smaller the glue dot, the smaller the duration of the note. So we have 2 smaller glue dots on the 2 smaller apples to represent those paired eighth notes. And then we have a larger glue dot on the larger apple to represent that quarter note. And you could also use 3-dimensional stickers, different types of foam, whatever the shape is that will help, just so that students can feel it. So if they're tapping through, they can feel those rhythms. So in this example, we sort of talked about pitch and rhythm. In this next example, we're going to be talking more about the notation. So what we have here are our notation vocabulary cards. And these I found help students familiarize themselves with actual notation. So those unfamiliar symbols of traditional notation are no longer unfamiliar. We're learning how to make them and what they look like and what they feel like. So what I did here is I took foam, and there's like sticky foam. I think this was just regular foam that I glued. But I took 3-dimensional foam and I cut it out, or I actually used our die cut or Ellison machine at our school and made these different notes. But you could cut them out if you didn't have that type of machine. And I cut them out in the different shapes, and then I just glued them on to a little book here. But it made it possible for the students to feel, oh, this note has a line and a circle, but it's not filled in. oh, this note has just a circle and it is filled in, and it has a stem. So they could learn about what actually made up that note. They can also say the note. They can say the note however you're saying it, like quarter note or half note, or if you're using different syllables like ta or what have you. And then I did put some binding at the top so I could flip through the pages of this book. I did make a couple of these so that the students can use them with one another, and then I can use them with one another. To make this book here, I used cardstock for the actual pages, and then I used foam because I found that the students really liked the feeling of foam, and it was pretty durable, and it would stick up enough off the paper. I used a binding machine and some comb binding, and some scissors, and once again that glue gun. So I cut out pieces to be the actual pages of my book, and all the same size out of the cardstock. Now I think I actually might have laminated these so that they were more durable, and then I glued the notes on top of that. And then I used the binding machine, and I went ahead and already just put the cards ready and had it bound at the top. After I made the actual book, that's when I put in those cut out quarter notes, maybe paired eighth notes, whole notes, half notes, quarter rests out of the foam. And then I would glue one note or rest on each card. And I think foam comes sticky now, so you could do that too as well. So we talked about a notation example, we talked about rhythm examples that are tactile, and we talked about ways to make pitch more tactile. Well, maybe you have some listening maps or other traditional notation already that you love using. There are some ways that you can adapt your current materials. So here is Starlight Starbright, and this was just actually the regular quarter notes and paired eighth note version. But what I used here is the adhesive Velcro, and these already came in circle sizes. I think they're called Velcro dots or something like that, and I just bought 2 different sizes. And I stuck on the circle of Velcro over the note head. Now here I did use the 2 different sizes, but if you wanted just to use all the same size, you could do that as well. But here I was demonstrating to the students not only pitch, but also the rhythm, that the quarter note lasts longer than an eighth note. You could, of course, use more 3-dimensional stickers, glue lines, glue dots. There are all these adhesive things that really help enhance our student learning. So now I'd like to take some time and do our poll questions. So we have 2 here, and love to have you participate in our poll questions.
So I will launch our first one. So what are some materials that can be used to make tactile music? Please select 1, different types of glue, Velcro, stickers of varying materials, or all of the above. So I'll give you all about 15 seconds to vote. All right, I'm going to close the poll. Let's get any last votes in. And it looks like 100% of the people who voted said all of the above.
Oh, great.
They're paying attention.
Yay! And then we have a second one for you here.
So what is one piece of existing music literacy material that you currently have that can be altered to become tactile music? Please select 1. Listening maps, traditional notation, none, I'm excited to make tactile music from scratch, or other. Give you about 5 more seconds to place your vote. So we had 4% who said listening maps, 54% who said traditional notation, 42% who said none. I'm excited to make tactile music from scratch, and 0% that said other. Who said other? All right,
Okay,
back to
great.
you.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, I'm so glad that so many of you are excited to start making some. And those of you, I hope, who have the listening maps and traditional notation have found some ideas that you can maybe use with your materials. I'm going to actually keep going here and talk about some other ideas that sort of helped me with my students with special needs in my music instruction. I'm guessing maybe some of you are familiar with the concept of the communication board. I know when I first started teaching, I'd seen a lot of students with special needs use them. I was always jealous that I couldn't always figure out a way to make it for music, but I'm going to show you the one I have made for music. And then I'm going to talk to you about some other books that I use in my instruction that maybe have larger font and also have Braille. So first is my communication board. So I use this for my students to communicate. At first, when I first saw other teachers using them years ago, I was really jealous. I wanted all these great images, and I didn't know how to find them, and I didn't really know how to make one really durable. But I found out all the resources, and I found a way to make it durable for my classroom. And it really can be altered for any content or any unit you're doing or anything. I found this very beneficial for my nonverbal students, but beneficial for everybody. It helped increase having the students make sentences. It helped us learn new vocabulary and learn what the word of the new vocabulary and then what a picture of it was, and it just really enhanced our learning. So over here on the right, I do have a picture of my current communication board. And it might be difficult for you to read, but the top strip up there says, I want egg shakers. So I would have my students, when they are selecting instrument, and many of their IEPs or individualized education plans, making choices is something that they need to do on a daily basis. So I would present them maybe with 2 choices or 3 choices of instruments, and they needed to select an instrument and make this sentence using our pictures on our communication board. And they might say, I want egg shakers, or maybe I choose, or whatever verb you would like there. To make this, and I can say mine is really held up, it has been very durable, so that's what I'm always looking for. I don't want to have to keep making something, so I wanted to make it durable the first time. What I used was a 3-ring binder. I did use, what the stores call like their durable kind, but I found I really only needed it to be about 1 inch thick, no bigger. You probably could even do a 1/2 inch, but you're just really looking for something durable. Once again, I used Velcro. I really like Velcro, so I used some more adhesive Velcro. I used foam board again. Now I chose black foam board because I wanted to match black binder, but you can do whatever you want. And then I have the communication board pictures, and I just actually found these online. And I found this whole music set, so I got really excited. And then some scissors, and once again, that glue gun. So to make this, I printed and cut out all of the pictures. And I actually put them on cardstock. And then I laminated them individually. I really just want to make sure these things last. After that, I cut out foam board to match the size of my square picture, and I glued it right on top. Now, cutting out foam board it's not always the easiest. Depending on how thick the foam board is, or I guess your finger strength, you can use scissors. I found it easier to use like a straight edge or an X-Acto knife, whatever works for you. So I glue those on with the glue gun, and then on the very back of the foam board, I put the little pieces of adhesive Velcro. Then, with the opposite Velcro side, I put strips on my binder, and I had my binder lay horizontally so that when it was like on the floor in the student's hands, that the rings, they are still inside of the binder, they're on top. So I made the binder go horizontally here. So then I put the strips of the Velcro on top of the binder, and I also, when you open up the binder, I put additional strips of Velcro in there as well so that I could store the pictures. I created so many pictures, though, that I eventually needed an extra little crayon box for all of them, but I put the ones I used on a daily basis right inside the binder. And so then what I would have my students do is maybe choose an instrument, or maybe select what they heard, or if we had an assembly, they would create a sentence, that's saying maybe that we were going to a concert. And I just found that this communication board really helped them not only get to play different instruments, but be able to talk with me and communicate with me about music class. And so I found it to be very, very helpful, and it's lasted a decent amount. It's been very durable, so I've been pretty happy with the results. I've had the opportunity in my classes this year to try to use a lot more books. And I had a lot of our folk songs and traditional songs can be supplemented with books. So they're everywhere, and it's been really great. What I did here is I've listed a couple books that I use. Five Little Monkeys, Barnyard Dance, and there's this great dinosaur one called Stomp, which also comes with, there's a different version where it has it's a bilingual and it has the Spanish words right below, so that was very helpful as well. But I've been using these more in my classes, and not only did I maybe have the songs that we're learning, but they also have movement, such as in Barnyard Dance and Stomp. We're talking a lot about movement, and as children can move different ways with their body to different music. So we've been using a lot of books lately, and I found that very helpful. Now, two of these books I actually bought the board book version so that I can give these to the students, and they're very durable. But I was also able to find some of them in larger font for those that maybe are a little more visually impaired, and also some that use Braille. So in this picture right here, what I was trying to show you is this actually has the text in Braille right below it. And it helped my students maybe stay more engaged when we were reading through the song or working on the lyrics. Maybe we're talking about that countdown from 5 monkeys to 4 monkeys and going all the way down to 0. And they really enjoyed having it, that book in their hands. I found that a lot of these books are available in Braille and/or larger font. And before this year, I actually didn't even know it, but I just found them, and it's been a nice addition to our classroom. So these really do help our visually impaired students read along, sing along, or maybe just follow when the music teacher is singing, or if the music is being played. So last, what we're going to be doing today is creating our own tactile music. So here is where you are going to want to try to find your, I believe we called it our worksheet. So this is the Create Your Own Tactile Music worksheet. It's also on our panel here for the webinar under handouts. So it's the one that has worksheet in it. And you also will need a pen or pencil. It doesn't really matter which you use. So I'll give you a second to gather those. All right, so I have 3 different versions of Create Your Own Tactile Music. For this first one, what I have given you is just the stems of paired eighth notes and a quarter note. And what we're going to be doing is drawing a picture that could be used to notate our song of Doggy Doggy Where's Your Bone without using traditional note heads. So if you're unfamiliar with that song, the song I'm referring to is Doggy Doggy Where's Your Bone, and it just keeps going like that. We're only going to use the one phrase though. Doggy Doggy Where's Your Bone. Now some ideas include maybe you want to draw a picture of a dog if you're that artistically inclined, or maybe just a dog bone. Or since this song does have a question, maybe you just want to put a question mark for your note head. So go ahead right now and choose a picture, something that you can draw on each of where the note heads would be. So you're taking your pencil and your pen or pencil and drawing either maybe a dog head, maybe a dog bone, maybe a question mark, but and replacing where the traditional note head would be. Now what we've just created is our student-friendly music notation. And the goal here is that students can actually touch or feel the rhythm and pitch of this song using a mixture of the familiar, something they know with their dog bones, question marks, and maybe some of the more of the unfamiliar, the pairing of the eighth note pairs or the quarter note. Now, you could also take this a step further and use three-dimensional stickers, right? And they could really have a tactile music example. So that's one version. We're going to go now down to version 2. This really helps students touch and feel the pitch. So we're going to take our pen or pencil, and we're going to actually poke a hole through our paper here, and we're going to poke a hole as large as the note head. So try not to go any larger than that. You're just going to poke a little hole. I'm poking along too. And you're going to poke a hole right with the note head. Now you can do it from the front of the paper, or you can go from the back of the paper, whatever you prefer, if you can see it. Okay. I just successfully poked the note heads, and I'm feeling over the paper, and I'm hoping that you can feel as well the little bumps, and maybe you can feel it more on the other side if you poke from the back. But you can actually feel the pitch and the rhythm of this. Oh, that's a good idea. So here, I'll share with you what I've done. So here is my actual paper, and I just poked through the note head just like this so that you can touch and feel it. Now, if you do it from the back side, I guess you would get a little more of a bump, but do whatever works best for you. But now the student, you're getting an idea what the student is feeling with that tactile music notation. Now, I kept all of these the same amount, the same size note head, but on this third example here, we are going to poke a hole through each of the eighth notes here, and those are the same size, but now when we get to that quarter note, it'll be a much larger hole. So let's go ahead and do that for version number 3. So just take your pencil, and I think I might try it from the from behind, and then so you can actually feel a little bit more of the bump. So go ahead and take that pencil, and just make sure that quarter note, the last one you do, is bigger. So you can see. And the idea here is not only are the students working on pitch, high and low sounds, but now we're really incorporating the thought of rhythm, the concept of, these eighth notes have a shorter duration than this larger hole for the quarter note. So we would have the doggy, doggy, where's your bone? Now once again, we just poked holes, but if we continued with the actual three-dimensional images or three-dimensional stickers up here, they would be feeling along for the entire song. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we don't need any more of our tactile paper, but I'm going to open this up to if anyone has any questions.
We've had one question come in so far. And I encourage everyone else to type in your questions now. Brenda would like to know, do you always use the same picture for all notes? Would you ever differentiate for the lyrics? For example, dog, dog, question mark, bone.
I've never really thought of it that way. I always tried to keep everything as not simple, but I didn't want to have a lot of variables going on because I thought maybe reading music might be overwhelming in general. But I think that's a really good idea. I do remember one song, it was a traditional song called Cuckoo, and it went, cuckoo, cuckoo, who are you? I'm a bird, and it had like this little boy singing and the bird singing, and in that tactile piece of music, I did have an image just for the humans, the little boys part, and then I had a bird image just for the bird part to help them differentiate between two parts singing. And I bet you could go further that with any other kind of song. I find whatever seemed to make the most sense for the students, but I did try to make it as simple as possible because I didn't want to have too many variables going on because I was already doing pitch and rhythm and all these ideas. But I think that's a really, really neat idea.
Brenda would like to know, what age groups do you teach?
I currently teach kindergarten through 5th grade, and I have about 700 students. Some of my students with special needs push into the general education classroom, and some of them I go to them and just work with them independently in their classroom. So I do have a mixture of music setups, but I do have the privilege of seeing everyone in my entire school.
Charles would like to know if you can talk a bit about your work with students who are deaf or hard of hearing.
I've had limited experience with students who are deaf. I have had a couple of students who were hard of hearing, and with that, I found that the glue dots and anything that I made that had like something more for them to touch was what they sort of gravitated for. They wanted anything that they could feel if they weren't quite understanding what I meant with the high and low. If they understood it was higher on the page, and when I sang higher, that seemed to really help. So that's where I started actually using a lot of glue to help them feel those bigger concepts.
No.
And Lisa, I'm not sure, did we have any other questions?
Not yet. Sometimes it takes people a few minutes to get warmed up.
Yeah. No.
Well, I can show you if you want. I think my webcam is still on. I can show you. This is the handout of what you will have here, and it shows sort of like a shopping list, if you will, of the different examples I talked about today, and it has a little like check off, so you can check off once if you need something at the store. But this has it organized by example, so that's what's on the handout.
And I went ahead and uploaded the handout for those people who are watching the webinar live. I added those two handouts to the handout section. So if you want to download those now, you can. If not, those will be included in the follow-up email that goes out.
Great.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you.
We do have one question.
Okay.
Sure. Have you ever had students confuse the lines on the page of the whole song with the line that is high or low?
Lines on the page. I'm not sure. Oh, maybe with the touch chart. Okay, so I haven't. But when I did, like, if you think back to how I had Starlight, Starbright, and I sort of had the lyrics throughout. When I first introduced that to the students, we only did the first quarter of it, and I presented actually more horizontally. And then once they get used to it, then they see the full page. So that might be why they've never confused it with high and low, because I did present it horizontally first, and then we were able then to put all 4 of those spots on one page, if that makes sense.
Oh, I have myself on mute. Some positive feedback. Brenda says, not a question, just want to thank you for creating such an informative and visual presentation. Julianne says, everything you have shown us is so wonderful. I teach music to a large group of students and wondered if you had any ideas as far as using just one large visual for a music activity that everyone can see and engage in.
Oh, that's such an interesting idea. I do sometimes I do like use that like what's that called, that roll paper that you can get in those really big rolls, and we put out on the floor, and we have done things where the students have to move different like frisbee-sized discs to the different lines and spaces of a staff. I've done that. I've also just put down masking tape on the rug. To represent a 5-line staff and had different students sit on different lines and spaces. So there are lots of things. I usually meet my class always in a circle, so we always have everything. Everyone's looking at everyone, and we have everything that we're doing inside of our circle. But I find that they love that kind of like, it's almost like Twister. I think they think like, because they're all sprawled out on this huge staff, and they have to find like the second line, or they have to find D and such. So that's sort of how I've adapted some of these ideas into a large group.
Charles is wondering, do you use instruments or mostly voice?
I do both. We do a lot of, I'm very, very blessed at my school right now. I have full orc ensemble and full drum ensemble, and I teach my students in grades 3 through 5 recorder. So I have all of those instruments and plus a lot of auxiliary percussion instruments that I use on a daily basis. But I also do a lot with voice and a lot with movement. We do a lot of dance and movement. So I do a little bit of everything.
Brenda says, thank you so much. I teach theater to students with autism, and I'm excited to bring a tactile approach to our musical theater curriculum. And we'll also remind for those of you who follow the VSA International blog, Jennifer is going to be featured later this week on the blog. So if you want some more tips from Jennifer, it's a good place to look.
Thanks.
All right, well, I am going to take control back and show my screen. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for this presentation. I think it was really informative, and I loved your visuals too. And I want to ask you, our webinar participants, to remain on the webinar a few minutes longer and complete a short evaluation survey that will open when I close the window. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again at the end of January. So thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.